Tell a story without taping it now?
No, the first snapping turtle. Where'd you get it? Where'd you get a snapping turtle?
The creek.
Oh, we lived down on the creek.
Well, we went down there on the creek below the big house, clear down to the creek. Anyhow, they caught an old snapping turtle. He was sitting there with his mouth open. Glenn stuck one of them old firecrackers, old flash crackers in his mouth. He bit down on it and pulled his head back. Well, he bit down on it.
Glenn did that?
What?
Glenn?
Yes. And he's sitting there holding that. And so he let it. He pulled his head inside. There was a sparking out in front. He pulled his head back in there, and when it went off, it split him right down the back.
Oh, that's terrible. No. That's terrible.
A lot of fun.
My dad said, I never. What are you going to do now?
I remember another time, over on the Kern's place, Everett and I was out there one evening, getting ready to go to milk. There was a stray dog come in there, kind of a young-looking, long-eared, shepherd-looking thing. And it was about 4th of July, and we had some firecrackers. So we just tied a bunch of them on his tail, turned him loose. He took off down that lane, and about every 3 feet one of them went off. He's yelping and howling, and he went right on it. That was about 60 years ago, and I ain't heard of it since. But every so often they would go off, just like it was. Usually they'd blow off and lose them all. That just stayed right with it. We lived up on Grandpa's place. Mom called up one day, kind of tickled. Wanted to know if I'd come up and help her get the calves back in the pen, and had some bucket calves down over the bank in the pen. And so I went up there, and Everett and Dad had gone somewhere, and Everett come over from the old Kern's place, and a couple of young dogs followed him over there, and they'd suck eggs or whatever, and cause a little bother around there, and she didn't want them there, so she thought she'd just paper sack them, get rid of them. So she put a little corn in them and tied them on their tails and started them off up the road, and one of them, he went like a dickens up the road and headed on over the hill for home, and the other one went down through the calf pen, and the calves all went out through the fence every direction, and he went on out the other end over the hill for home. And she was so tickled she almost was down and couldn't talk when I got up there. Still tickled about that. She gets so tickled that she almost go down and not make much noise at all, but just tickled to death. We got a lot of fun out of that later on. Kidding her about it. Another time she called up and wanted me to come up and help her a little bit. So I went up there. She had a brooder house, some little chickens in there, and a electric brooder on them. And she was out there chopping some wood, splitting up some wood for the cook stove, and seemed like she took kind of a high swing and hooked one of them wires and just jerked about 6 feet of it out and cut off the power to her chickens. So she wanted me to come up and fix it. I got up there and she was laughing again about that, and we kidded her a lot about that swinging pretty heavy on that stick. But she'd get real tickled over anything like that. A lot of fun. Alice was wondering what I missed most about my parents. That kind of stuff is a lot of it. Having fun with them, talking to them, and visiting and asking a few questions, and nowadays remembering a lot we should have asked and didn't. But the fun we had, I guess, was the most important part of it, really. We had a lot of fun. Mom would really get tickled when she got tickled. That is probably the most thing I miss about them, talking to them, is to after Mom died, she went kind of sudden like. But after she died, I always wished I'd have been a little nicer and went to see her more. But all in all, they had a real good life, I guess. The kids were around all the time. Some of them were around most of the time, in and out, or close enough to holler at. Yeah, I think they had a pretty good time, but I wish I'd have been a little nicer and went to see her more. Not that I was mean to her or anything, but I could have went to see her more often. Carried on with her a little more. Wendy was a-wondering what we done for our birthday when we was young. And I don't know if anything special. She wanted to know if there's any the most special remembered one. But I don't remember any of them very awful special. That is, very many of them. We always got a present, I suppose. Our overalls or shirt, and maybe socks and a handkerchief or something like that. We always had some kind of a present. And I remember one time I tried to get away. I had birthday on a Saturday, and there was a football game on. And we were shucking corn, Everett and I was shucking corn, and I couldn't get away to go to that thing. They had a knothole club that you could join and get in free, the kids. But I don't think I got away that day or went to see it. We were shucking corn, and Everett and I shucked in one wagon and Dad and Freddie in the other one. And we took 2 rows usually. Shucked 2 rows, and Everett was shucked in between 2 rows, and I'd go on the outside between the second and third one and clean that up in between there. And that way we could come through next time with a team straddling a row and leaving one that had been shucked between the one and one that hadn't. So they wouldn't be chewing off all the corn all the time. But I couldn't get away that day, I don't think, to go to the football game on my birthday. But usually on my birthday, my grandmother was 50 years older. Her birthday was on the 24th and mine was on the 22nd of November. So we always try to get together on one of our birthdays, probably had a piece of cake or something, and hugged each other a little probably. But she was 50 years older, and so we tried to get together. That was one kind of a special day for me. I remember when 1935, I was 25 years old and she was 75 years old. And we got together that day and had a little special day. Spent quite a little time together. Probably had ice cream and cake that time. She was always wanting to celebrate on that day. Thanksgiving was a time to get together for everybody at Grandma's house. And every once in a while it'd be her birthday or my birthday hit on Thanksgiving Day. And that made it a little more special. That we didn't get 14 presents from everybody those days. And there was another time along in the early 20s that Everett and Freddie, or whichever one, needed something done that they didn't want to do very bad. They'd promised me a banana split if I'd do it for them. And I'd finally give in and do it. That went on for quite a while. Then I kind of thought I ought to be gathering a little banana split stuffing. Every time we got to town where they were broke, they didn't have money to buy one. So they got by with that for a long time. And finally they kind of dwindled away from promised me a banana split. I don't know how many they were supposed to have got, but I never got any until my 60th birthday, which was 1970, about 45 years later or such. I had a birthday party out at Alice's. And they were all over there, and they finally, after supper and all the carrying on was over, why they brought me a banana split. But I still think they didn't have money enough to buy one because they got Lorene to make it. After all, anyhow, I got my banana split. I suppose I couldn't eat it all. But they got a big kick out of that, finally giving me a banana split. I waited a long time for it. And it was a kind of happy event. Everett thought he'd really done something, getting that banana split for me. And I guess he had. It was a big thing. Had a lot of fun on it. This is July the 12th, 1987. Last month when Rach came to get married and celebrate the golden wedding, Laurie went with us over to pick her up at the airport, and we got talking about some planes out there. I told her I'd like to have one of them, that one out there with a blue nose. And got talking about flying a little bit. She wanted to know about it. She didn't remember that I didn't know that I'd flown, I guess, but so I'll tell her how that happened. There was an airport down here just at the edge of, east edge of town, and then there was another one out there west of the sail barn, or east of the sail barn, on the north side of the highway. And Max McCord, Elner's cousin, was in on that one out there, and they said they'd solo me for $65. So I thought maybe that'd be a fine thing. I got an awful yen to fly. They was flying around over our place out there all the time, and students are flying around from both of them airports. And I got a real yen to fly, so I went out there and took some lessons, and they hired a guy from Topeka. He was had a commercial license for a instructor, and I worked with him for several times, and finally there were a bunch of them that could fly for advertisement. They took a circle over town with about 5 or 6 planes in a bunch, just for advertising one Sunday, and when they got back over there to land, well, he flipped his upside down. So they let him go. And another guy took me over, and he went around with me a couple of times, and he wanted to know how that guy was having me land. I said, well, he's having me look out there a little ways, and coming in there, and after you get down there about so low, I try to hold it off till it settles in there and lands. And he said, well, you look out the other end of the runway, watch that when you're coming in. So I did that, and it helped quite a bit. Come in there a little easier. I never did have much trouble landing pretty good, but that helped anyhow. And then we went around a time or two, and then he stepped out and said, okay, take her around. And those planes that we were using were Luscombe, and you sat side by side. And when he got out, he sure left a lot of daylight coming in that side that I hadn't been used to. But I took her around and got back in all right. And then he'd go once in a while with me and try them spins and stuff. I didn't really care much about them. But a spin is something you're supposed to have if you get a license. Being able to negotiate one of them, you cross control to get them to spin, and then you got to cross control to get them back out. So you need to know it, I guess. But anyhow, I took 5.5 hours solo, and only go about a half hour at a time, because you can fly over the whole end of the state in an hour, seems like. Only supposed to get 10 miles away, only not over 10 miles when you're just practicing before you get a chance to take your license, try for your license. But anyhow, most of the time when I come in, I didn't want to catch my wheels on the light line and had to fly over or anything like that. I always come in pretty high up. And another time I was taking off, and coming in for touch landings. Go around, come in and just touch and then take off again. And I done that, and I got pretty close to the other end of the runway farther than I should before I touched down. And when I started to go, why, golly, there's some big old trees up the north end there over a deep creek that I thought maybe I wasn't going to get over, but I, instead of trying to go up over it steady, I went down there and give her a heck for just a little bit on the level, picked up some speed, and then I humped it up over there and got along real good. But when I come back around or got done that evening, I told the guy about it, and he says, yeah, I saw you doing that. That was a pretty good move. But I got my yen filled up and run out of money, and Mary was about to be born, or had been just lately. Can't remember which. Anyhow, I thought I hadn't ought to be flying her too much with little kids like that. So anyhow, I got filled up on it and found out I could fly if I had to. So that was the end of my flying lessons. Here's a kind of a little quickie I've thought about lots of times. I can remember writing at school, writing 1917 and 18, and when we got to 1919, I thought that was the greatest thing that ever happened, to be able to write 1919. I've always remembered that. I can still see the 1919 on the paper. A big deal, of course. But I'm sure I won't ever see 2020. So 1919 was quite a thing to get to write that. Some of this stuff probably you have to think about that a while. Like that old boy on the television. Think about that. Mel was wondering what I remembered about the kids. Well, lots of stuff I remember. Start off with Mel. He got in a lot of stuff he hadn't ought to been in, but he got to be a real good welder when he was pretty young, and does a beautiful job. Makes it look really good. And he had other talents too, of course, but and Alice, she's a little cuckoo on horses finally. And I can remember when we went over to Alma one time to a 4-H thing, and Uncle George took his old Rondo horse over there, and they entered the cutting contest. I guess they entered other things too, but Alice won the cutting contest, and Bill took second. They thought they'd really done something, and I guess they had. And Rachel, she was kind of fancying that ballet there for a while. And old Mary, she blew the horn in high school. And I remember, I guess they was having a K-State parade or something. Anyhow, there was a high school band coming around the corner from the North 3rd and turned up points, and I was over on the south side there watching, and when they come around that corner and started up points, and she was a stomping off the country there and a blowing the horn, it just a couple of tears, I remember. And of course there's lots of other stuff, but those were some of the points I remember right easy like. Wayne was wondering about the Whitney baseball team, College Hill. Well, we had a Whitney baseball team. We played one summer, part of the time. It had been Glenn and the twins, and Everett and Freddie and I, and Cope. That had been 7. And then we could run in Clyde a little bit, I guess. And then my dad and Uncle Ralph and AC, probably get some of them to help Bill out. And we played a few games, and I don't think we ever lost one. Kind of a tough bunch. But there was many other regular old community guys that kind of hard to cut them out a Sunday, you know, playing Sunday ball. You didn't let them play, why, they didn't know what else to do on Sunday hardly. But we played several games on the Whitney side, but otherwise we played a lot of games out there on the College Hill by the schoolhouse. It wasn't it had a good diamond there, but the outfield, yeah, you had to get over in the pasture on the other side. On the right field, you might have to jump over the fence to get a fly ball, or out into the road on the south side on the left field. And once in a while somebody knocked it clear across the road into the hedge fence. There was a big hedge fence on the south side of the road along there, used to be. And they made that road wider and taken some of the outfield off of the side, south side, center field, left center. But it used to handle the game pretty good. And we played a lot of games there Sunday afternoons. And we played, you could always get somebody from the college or around town that had a team, and you could always get a game with some of those kind of guys, college kids or somebody in town had a team. But you could go to St. George, Zinedale, Waubonsee, and Flush. Flush had a good team up there usually. Maybe Westmoreland and Oldsburg and Flush. Flush always had a team. Then you come down, Stockdale had a pretty good team usually. And in Keats, they were kind of a rough bunch up there. So you could get a game about every Sunday. And pretty tough competition. Played a lot of good ball. Of course, we went to the other places too, but this only lasted about probably 10, 12 years till it kind of got all busted up, you know, guys leaving and going on. But we had a lot of fun there. Played a lot of good ball. I remember one time I was playing third base and some guy knocked a hot fly ball over my head and I jumped trying to catch it and just ticked it with my hand of my fingers and knocked a little finger out of joint right square back. And Glenn was a catching and I went down there and he pried it back over into the socket. It was pretty sore for a while. Hey, I remember one you guys would like to hear. We was playing some fraternity outfit from the college and we was beating them pretty bad. And somebody knocked a fly ball out there to them when they was in the field. And the left fielder and the center fielder trying to get to it. They run together. Plunk. And they both went down. The ball fell. And one of them got up after a while kicking around and the other was laying on the ground having quite a lot of trouble. They got out there trying to get him straightened out. He'd swallowed his tongue. And some guy finally got his finger down there and got it dug out. Got it straightened out, but he was in quite a fix. I guess he got all right. Didn't read in the paper where he died or anything. We thought that was kind of funny after it was all over with. In the last half of the 20s, the city had a couple of leagues, the City League and the Industrial League in the baseball. And Freddie and I got on an Industrial League team, Odd Fellows. And we had a ball game this night. But first we had some cattle we had to move. Arthur Fielding had an elevator here in town in the farm out toward where the dehydrator is, and he bought and shipped hay and a lot of stuff like that. And he had some cattle down there. Every spring, where they take the yearlings out up the Wildcat, we'd come right straight through town here on the Kearney Street Road, come straight off of the McCall Road, whatever it is over there, and go right straight up Kearney to the campus, jog north, just north of the old dorm, first old dorm up there. Road went straight on through toward Capsule and up that way, and then jog down there onto the Wildcat, and went up past Russell's and followed the road up to where it runs into the reservation now and turns south. We went straight on west there for about a couple or 3 miles, and they had a pasture up there. Then we'd bring them back down the line every fall. Have to bring them in, driving back down to the farm down here first. That's the second crossroad after you go across the bridge out here on the 24, whatever they call it. South down in that country is where they had the farm. We got up 3 o'clock this morning and we had our breakfast and got ready and left at 3 o'clock and rode up there, horseback, rode clear up there, and got those cattle. The guy from the farm and another fellow was up there too, but Anyhow, we brought him down, and the time we got down there, it was around 4 o'clock, I suppose. And we got him in the pan, and then we had our dinner. And Everett brought our ball suits, and he come down in the car and brought our ball suits and took our horses home, loaded them back up on the old Kern's place. And we come to town, and after we had our dinner, changed into our ball suits and got out there and played ball that evening. Had a heck of a lot of fun. I remember I played a pretty good game that night. Of course, it wasn't in the dark yet because it didn't have lights. I caught just these fly balls out there playing center field. And I got a couple of hits. Had a heck of a good ball game. So that turned into quite a long day. You wouldn't think you'd want to play ball after all that, but we done a good job. Had a lot of fun. Then there was a little later on, Tyne Hill, this old boy neighbor down there used to lease a lot of pastures up around there, and then get cattle for them, fill them with other people's cattle. And I done most of these riding through the summer to keep counted and strays where they belong and such. And they had some from Yorktown, Texas. They shipped a 3-car load up here. I don't know how many that had been, probably 50 to 70 head of some kind in there. Anyhow, they wanted the grass was pretty dry that summer and starting into the dirty 30s, I guess. So they weren't doing very good. They weren't gaining like they ought to, they thought. So they wanted to ship them back down there. They'd had some rain down there and some grass. They were going to take them back down there. So we took them over to Keats to ship them. But you could send a caretaker with each car, free ride. So Freddie and I and Bob Stover went with them. They got on the old freight train caboose at Keats. We didn't stop at Manhattan, but stopped at St. Zendale down here, and Eleanor and Louise come down there and met us while we stopped a while and brought us some sandwiches and stuff to take along. But anyhow, we went on, and they had to unload them every so often. They had to unload them and feed them and water them like 24 hours or something. Anyhow, they had to unload them in Fort Worth, Texas, and feed them and water them. I suppose they had to lay over there for 12 hours anyhow, or maybe longer. So we monkeyed around there, sleeping on the railroad wagons and baggage carts and stuff, and monkeying around. There was quite a lot of dead animals there. It was getting along about that time when the government would give you $12 a head if you could get them, or $17 a head if you could get them to the loading point. And if they died there, well, you still got your money. Starving to death cattle, kind of. Anyhow, the yards down there had quite a lot of dead cattle in it. And they had a wagon picked up and an old Fordson tractor pulling it around through there, picking up those dead cattle. And cattle that were down, even and not dead, they just throw a rope around them and drag them up in the wagon and pile them up in there with the dead ones and all, hauling them off. And there's quite a lot of them in there then. But anyhow, on the way down there, it seemed like this was a long old train most of the time. We could see the engine way off to the side once in a while, and a lot of slack in the train. You could hear it coming, bump, 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 taking the slack out. And then when it hit you, why, it kind of shook things. And then when it caught up, and you're going down there, why, after a while, it'd probably go the other way. Catch up and go bump. Knock the lights clear off of the inside of the caboose. We laid out on long benches. They had long benches in there to sit in, the caboose. Lay on them, and boy, and that come a long way, you'd slide you clear to the other end. Go ka-plunk. Yeah, that got kind of rough old riding. And you didn't see anything on the backside of the towns, as far as towns went. And if they did stop, there wasn't much anything you could do and just sit around there and look as far as you could see. There wasn't much else going on. Once in a while there'd be a little town kind of connected close to the railroad yards. But we got down there finally and unloaded these cattle. Well, we didn't do anything about that. We just got down there where they unloaded them. And, of course, we couldn't get started home till the next day. Supposed to come back on the passenger train. So we wanted a place to clean up and didn't know where to go. And they said, well, they got a hobo camp down there a little ways on a creek, pretty good place to take a bath. So we went down there, and they did have a hobo camp. There wasn't hardly anybody there, but it had sure been used around there. Nice little swimming pool in the creek down there. And we took a good old swim. And then we went back up by the station and slept on those baggage carts they have, four-wheeled outfits. We just slept on there. And first we went over town. They had a little old town over there, Yorktown. And the north side of the street side of the damn stores were all open. And just walk in anywhere about. And we went into a eating place there, kind of a hamburger joint sort of a thing. And we got some toasted cheese sandwiches. Golly, they were good, I remember. We had a couple of them, and then we went and looked around over town a little bit. Darn, that was so good, we went back and got some more toasted cheese sandwiches. And then we went and slept on those little old carts there by the depot. Good thing it was warm weather, I guess. Anyhow, they put us on the passenger train, started home. We rode till, probably 10 o'clock. And the conductor come along and get our tickets. And he said, well, they didn't transfer these tickets down there. You have to get these transferred. How come they didn't transfer them? He said, well, you'll have to just get off up here to this next station and I'll send these back down there and get them transferred. And so they put us off at this little old burg. Then we sat around there most of the day and didn't know, there wasn't nothing to do, only just sit there and wait. And they had a rodeo in town that night, a little old rodeo. Golly, we went to that and had a great time watching them guys. A lot of entertainment, free of charge. But anyhow, that grubby conductor, he finally come back the next day and had his tickets, so we got to come on home. But down there in Fort Worth, when we going down the railroad yard there, and when we went out to see which caboose to get on, big old yard, and we saw a guy try to get a hold of him, see where our caboose was. And golly, he right away showed us that he had a revolver with him, because there wasn't anybody in sight anywhere. Thought maybe he's going to get robbed or waylaid anyhow, but he finally told us which caboose, had us follow him down there and be on the right caboose. But this guy that had put us off, he was wanted to show his authority too, it seemed like. Of course he had to, I guess, but we thought he was kind of dumb. Nobody told us to get him transferred anywhere. So we finally got on back. Made it. I don't know how come, but we did. And any of us ever been away from home, I don't think, before. We had quite a lot of fun on the way. Saw quite a little country from the railroad side of it. Anyhow, it was an experience. And as the years got drier and hotter, no rain, the springs in the pastures got kind of weak and wouldn't furnish enough water for the cattle that were in there. And so one year we had to pump water, drive them different pastures to where we were pumping it. There was a good well over there in Donaldson, which belongs to college now, north of the highway, up on the hill there, north of the road. This well was down there by the Ark Hill or Saddleback or whatever you call it, down the southwest of Ark Hill, down there in the draw. And he had an old Model A with a ruxle axle, or a Model T. He jacked up the hind wheel and put a belt on it and run his pump water. He'd sit there and pump. He had a couple of tanks there, and he'd sit there and run that pump. And I'd bring in little pastures around, go bring them, round them up and bring them in and keep them separated from the cattle that were in the pasture and the pastures that I had to go through. But I done all that by myself, bring them in there and keep them separated and let them drink for an hour or so and take them back. Go get some other pasture and bring them in. They were mostly small pastures around there that I brought in, but still took a lot of riding. And I done all of it on that little old Dungone. Never even put shoes on her. She used tough feet. Wasn't very big, but she sure done a lot of going. And that went on for quite a spell in the summer, that one summer. And we started getting a little rains. Spring started picking up again, and fall come along. We took the cattle out where they were left. Next year it was a little better, and they got along pretty good. That one spell we was almost out of water in the pastures. Little old drill trickling, dripping springs wouldn't furnish enough for one cow, let alone 30, 40 head. So that's what happened one summer, besides all the other riding. I done a lot of riding back there in those days. Old Tarn Hill, he had 1,000 head of cattle up there one year, I remember. That took quite a lot of riding. A lot of pastures around, some of them up north of Jesse's and west. And there's some down in north where Jim lives, over in there. The Goheens and about all the colleges got up there. A lot of separate pastures, and I had to ride them, keep them counted, and sorted out where they belonged, and if they strayed, I try to fix the fence once in a while. And looking after the damn water gaps. After fairly decent rain, you had to go look at the water gaps, see that they weren't washed out, and if they were, why, fix them back so the cattle couldn't get out. That was a routine job after a rain. Usually hotter than the devil, and it was quite a job to get them old wires pulled out of the mud and brush and stuff and get back where they belonged. Tied together again, besides all the riding. And we had, when we got the cattle, we had to go to the rail to get them, and when we took them back, we took them to the rail to ship them. That was before they had many trucks running around. And there was a loading point at Casements out here, and at Keats, and there was two here in town, of course. And then Stockdale and Riley. We used them once in a while for shipping or getting cattle out of. Keats was a pretty regular place to ship from. But it took lots of riding. And you got them rounded up and headed down the road while you had to try to keep them in the road, out of the fields and farmyards and stuff like that. Try to keep them in the road. Had to kind of know what was going on and how to handle them. And there wasn't very many cars, but got so some roads had a few cars on them, and whenever one caught up with him, while you try to let him through the herd, you ride along the side of the road and kind of move him over and have him follow you through. I've done a lot of that, letting them through. Some of them try to go through without you letting them through, and they get the headlights kicked out and stuff like that. Drive up behind them old cattle and honking and stuff. They just have to kick them as not. That you met the car, why they just kind of stopped and let the cattle go around them. That it's quite a long old trips, long hours. Friday and I took some encasements from cows. Took them clear up to Garrison, north of Garrison one time. That was quite a trip. Head across the river up there. I think we crossed it. Garrison. Not sure whether they had a bridge there or whether we had to cross the Stockdale, but it seemed like we went on north. We crossed north of Stockdale somewhere up there, out of Garrison crossing, I guess. Anyhow, went right through Garrison town, and which wasn't very big. Did have a main street though, kind of a road through, and north of town there a ways. And there was always getting home after you got the cattle delivered. Jog and jog and jog. It was kind of a long, old, tiresome day, but I always enjoyed it myself. And you didn't always take all the cattle in the pasture at once. Sometimes you take out a load or two, the fatter ones, and ship them, and then later on get some more. Quite a lot of that done over at the Randall's pasture over south. We used to go up that quite a lot. Ride over there for Hiley. Round up a pasture, cut out some of them and bring them back to town, load them on a car. He lived out there on the Wildcat. I went along a few times from out there. You wanted to get to the pasture about daylight, so you'd have to get up pretty early in the morning to ride clear to town and out there south of town to the pasture by daylight, and then ride home after you got in, unless they were going to work again the next day, and sometimes we left the horses out there in the pasture. And rode home in a car. Not very often. Main thing, we didn't have a car most of the time. Those were good old days. Getting them out of town was a kind of a big thing. Getting it back in town was another big thing. Especially coming in while they were thirsty and hungry and raring to go somewhere. Some of them bunged up a little bit, so they didn't travel very good, and you always had the tail end to worry about trying to keep up. You had to hold the lead back lots of times so you didn't really get clear strung out too far. Took a lot of thinking and riding. Those were the good old days. Then they started getting in the trucks. You could haul your horses sometimes if you going too far away. You could haul your horses in the truck, save all that riding. And then they got them so they hauled the cattle in trucks and hauled them out in trucks. They don't know how to drive cattle much anymore. It don't seem to me like they had them out in the pasture. If one of them gets off stray, why, they don't cause much trouble. Not like it was along the roads. But that was good old times. Had some good horses those days. Tough anyhow. One time they shipped in some kind of old Mexico looking cattle, medium size, and they're spotted, all kinds of spotted. They were tip horn cattle. The tips of the horns had been cut off. But anyhow, they were kind of gentle old dogy kind of things. And they had, some of them had rawhide or chunks of hide had been fastened on their feet. And they'd worn out through the bottom, and there was some of that still up around their ankles. And I know we caught 2 or 3 of them and cut those off. I don't know whether they'd been worked or whether they just got sore-footed and they put them on, or whether the sand was too deep or what was going on. Kind of gentle old cattle. And they put them in a pasture up there north of Jesse's. And that same spring, Uncle George McCord was buying stock down at one of the stockyards, and he had a little office down there. And anyhow, they shipped in some one time, somebody did, and if they were, once in a while they'd find a dead one in the car, and got down and tramped on, or got weak or something. And this old steer was in real bad shape when they unloaded him, so they counted him dead, and the railroad had to pay for him. But Uncle George got him and kind of nursed him along a while and got him to go, and he wanted to put him out to pasture, so he put him on some pasture up there, but he got out over in the pasture with these old Mexico steers, and they decided just to leave him there because he'd stay there. He was kind of a wild sucker. And when he decided he wanted to sell him, he wanted me to lead a horse up there, up north of Jesse's, across the highway. He wanted me to lead a horse up there for him. He helped me run him in the barn up there, and he'd load him in a truck and haul him to town. So I led the horse up there and tied him up out there by the barn, and this pasture was just kind of through the fence on the north of it. And I went out there and I got this old steer and I brought him in there. And the barn was all shut up but the one door on the south corner. Just a little old double door kind of a door there, horse barn. And no fences or nothing around it. I brought that old steer up there and I was kind of holding him there at the south of that barn and working him around, and finally went in the barn. And I rode up there and shut the door, and just as I had done that, just as I got him in the barn, why George and the truck driver come up over the hill and stopped a minute till he went in. Boy, they didn't have to help get him in or nothing. There's a few bales of hay in there, and we piled him up back of the truck, and got in there and spooked him around. Finally he got up, got in the truck finally, kicking all them bales around, but he got in the truck. I hauled him off, but George thought that was an awful good job. I just had it all done gone. I put him in there by myself. He thought that was a great feat. He even told Mr. Casement about it. He thought it was a big deal. I didn't think I'd done such a great big thing, but I got her done. Proud of it. Then they had some old cattle from near Santa Rosa, New Mexico, somewhere down in there. They sent some old bulls, old worn-out bulls, a couple or three carload of them up here. They sent them to Riley, and Freddie and I went up there and drove them back down. They should have shipped them to Keats, but they shipped them to Riley, and we drove them down. One of them played out on the way, and we had to get a guy with a truck to haul him down. And we put them in the pasture west of Jesse's, old Shirley pasture. Anyhow, they'd taken the cattle out early, and we put these old bulls over there, and there was a guy came up from down there a week or so later and castrated them. And Freddie and I went over there and helped, but all we done is run them in the chute, in the loading pan there. Run them in the chute, and he just went in there behind them and done the job while they were standing there in the chute. And they lost one of them finally in a few days. He died, but they bled pretty bad, some of them. But anyhow, his name was Adair, and I didn't know anything about it at the time, but Tyne Hill, he come up with a job for me down there if I wanted it. This old boy told him where I could get a job. $1 a day and furnish your bedroll and saddle. And probably get a job of breaking horses. So I got all excited, of course. The pay wasn't damn great, but I thought I might work into something. So I decided to do that. They got it all laid out. The folks, we had an old Overland car, kind of an old junker. They decided they'd take me down there. And Ellen went along, and we went clear on down to her sister. And we spent a day or two down there, and then Helen stayed, and the folks brought me back up to Santa Rosa, where I met this Driggers, the guy that I was going to work for, owned the place. Their ranch was 30 miles square. It was supposed to have been the biggest ranch down there in the country. They still own it, and they've been in the fancy quarter horse business quite a while, but they still there. Anyhow, going down, most of the roads, highways were sanded roads, full of chuck holes, and washboards, kind of rough trip. That's the first time my folks ever went anywhere, only time, I guess. And I guess they probably had a real good trip out of it. My mother, she'd never been on a trip like that. So I'm glad they went on that anyhow, even if it was to haul me down there. Anyhow, we went back and met this Buster Driggers. So we stayed all night there in a cabin camp, hotel, or whatever you call them, cabin camp in those days, I think. Anyhow, the next morning he came down and took me out to the ranch, 30 miles, out there to where the headquarters was, kind of out in the middle of everything. Nothing much around, only country. And they had a kind of a barn and a round corral or two around there, pretty well equipped, and a bunkhouse in the house where they lived. That we were out with a wagon most of the time, chuck wagon. We were gathering calves to ship up to Caldwell and Wellington, up in that country, to wheat pasture. It was in the fall. But we'd round these cows up in one pasture, or part of a pasture, and take the calves off of them, and then they had line camps along every once in a while, a little old shack to put salt and cake in, and maybe a corral to put something in, and we'd leave them there, or maybe a couple of days we'd get a bunch and drive them over to the stockyards they shipped them all out of Cuervo, just a little old railroad station with a general store, and we take them over there and load them out. But quite a little trailing going over there. They'd maybe hold them over a bunch, and when them corrals, they got another bunch picked out, and then they take them together. But we held night herd a couple of nights. Somebody had to get up early in the morning and go hunt up the horses, bring them in so the guys could get their horses out. Everybody had 7 head in their string to alternate with. Sometimes we used 2 a day. They didn't feed them anything. I just let them graze nights and days when they weren't using them. But they didn't have any one special wrangler. They had turn. They wouldn't go off too far away usually. Maybe a couple of guys get up and go after them early in the morning and bring them in. Then they'd rope them and catch them that way usually. And there was a lot of carrying on. I had about three of my horses, old deadheads, wasn't much good, and didn't do anything, only jug around. And the rest of them had little spoil spots in them, like we was holding herd, cutting out some yearlings one time, and the boss was cutting them out. I was riding old, don't remember his name, he's an old, tall, long-geared, kind of a buggy horse, sort of a horse. Seemed gentle enough. Anyhow, the boss run a couple of yearlings out there just lickety-splat, a little extra. And he said, hold the lead one. So I fired up and went after that lead one and turned him back, and just as I did, why, the old horse broke off the other way, bucking. He bucked out across our ways. I lost my hat. Had to get off and get that on the way back, but that's all I run them out there for, just to get that started. And that's the only time that horse ever done anything. They keep pulling little tricks like that on you. See if they can start something. Once in a while they did. One time I was riding old Two-Spot. He had a couple of scars on his hips. They claimed an eagle tried to carry him off when he was young. I don't know what happened to him. Anyhow, they called him Two-Spot. He was a kind of a snorty, fiery little outfit. And I rode him 2 or 3 times. And nothing ever happened. And we was trailing some calves across the country there one time, and the guy from behind me, I was along the side, the guy from behind me, he kind of fired one in right behind me, trying to spook that horse, and it didn't work. And then they sent me to help him up one bunch through the gate, and then they said, you get off and shut the gate. You shut that gate and then come on back. And I thought that was probably another trick, so I got off and shut the gate. I tied my jacket on behind the saddle. He was warming up. And I got on, I rode a little way, and the old horse, I thought he was acting kind of funny, so I stopped and got off, and I rearranged that jacket on the back of my saddle, tucked the sleeves in so they didn't shake around so much. Got on and rode on in, and he didn't ever do anything, but he was supposed to. And finally, one of the guys asked me, he says, what did you ever do to that horse? He says, he used to buck with me every 30 minutes. And I said I hadn't done anything, and I hadn't. Well, just got to get him over things like that when I had a chance, if I had a chance. You don't usually have a chance on those kind of horses. They just blow up. There you go. But he never did buck with me. And that had him kind of puzzled, I think. Then they got an old black horse. They call him Coley. And he was supposed to have... They had some Mexican help that come and work a few days and get a little money and then quit. He was supposed to have thrown those guys off and then not let them get back on. He'd kick at them and stuff. Well, the boss, when he caught him for me that morning, he said, I'll hold him to get him saddled up. He said he's kind of like to be saddled once in a while. So he stayed there and held him while I saddled him. And the other guys got all ready and they rode out there about a block away, sat out there waiting. And I got him all saddled up, got on, and started out. He didn't do nothing. He didn't act like he'd done it. And we rode quite a ways west. This was a headquarters. We rode quite a ways west. Then we went into a 45,000 acre pasture. And we cut through the middle of it and worked the north end that day. And we were getting about to the center where we were going to gather them. And on the north end. We just crossed a little ditch there and up on another flat. There was quite a few cattle around there, and there's one little old calf kind of bawling, going the wrong direction. I slapped the shaft, just carried back. That old horse flew up, looked out across their ways, and I managed to stay with him. I lost one rein, so I had to get off and get hit, squared things around a little bit, got back on, and he never did buck again. And found out later he'd been used to bucking them off and not letting them back on. It was damn Mexican. But they'd try different tricks to spook them, see if they could have some fun. Didn't very many of them work, though. I took some credit for knowing how to handle the situations that some of them didn't ever know about. I broke quite a few horses here. Of course, I'd had some experience, all right. Kind of understood a horse. I'd done lots of riding. And I got by real good with it. By the way, while we were down at Roswell, where we left Eleanor's mother, we had a broken rim for the one wheel on the old car, and we had to get another one. And we went down there to the old junkyard, and the office was under another building, and there was a big old beam run through there, and they had a rattlesnake skin nailed up there on that. It was 30 feet long, 13 feet long, the biggest one I ever saw. He'd been quite a snake, I thought, when he was alive, 13 feet long. And then another time up there when we was holding some cattle, there was a kind of a open place out in the bunch. There was an open place that just kind of stayed open. kind of a round circle, and cattle kind of work away from it, kind of, and I couldn't figure out how come they didn't get together out there in that hole, but when they opened up and come to the outside, why, the darn horse wouldn't get within about 20 feet of it. There was no rattlesnake down in the dog hole there, just a buzzing and a buzzing. Nothing to get close to it. So that's what that was. And I saw a few other. I never saw a live rattlesnake, but down there, but saw a few dead ones. They somebody killed them along the trail, and they were prairie dogs. Towns here and there, not real big, but quite a few of them. And antelopes every once in a while. They were kind of tame. They were protected. And one old blind guy, one place we was working, he come cruising by there, just walking along, not kind of following the trail. And some of them guys bragged on having a horse they could rope an antelope off of. But I kind of figured they must have caught a sick antelope, because they're supposed to run faster than the horse can. But some of them bragged about it anyhow. And a few coyotes. See a coyote once in a while. I thought I was going to catch one time. He come down out of a mesa, what they call a mesa, kind of a half mountain kind of a thing, just a big old round hill stuck up out of the country there. He come down out of that, headed out across the country there, and I took after him, and I'd have gained on him pretty good, and then we come to a bunch of old flat rocks about level with the ground, big old slabs, and I was afraid that old horse would probably break his neck on that, so I pulled him in. The old cart went on down across the country. But there's a lot of, you can see some life around. Over there on the west side, the Pecos River cut around on the west side and kind of formed a boundary on the west side. Some of it was getting kind of high up, the pines and cedars along the far side of it, the east side of the river. And you look down across from the top of the hill there down toward the river, and way down there in a little old Mexican town off down in there, just a settlement kind of. But down around hill there, it was getting kind of flattening out a little bit, getting down closer to the river. There's a little spring come out of the side of the hill there and run off down to the river. It just was a kind of round hole, about 10 by 20, I guess, and just kind of stayed full of water, run over a little there. But when we rode up there, the cattle coming in there to drink, and I got there before many of them got there, and I rode there and was watering my horse. And there was looked like the end of an old wooden post sticking up there just under the water a little ways. I could see it. I thought it was a post laying in there. But as those cows come up, it just sunk away, disappeared. And it was probably 6 or 8 inches across. And I still think it was an old alligator. I asked them if it could have been, and they said, yeah, that could have been an alligator then. There was some down in the river once in a while. But I still think that old alligator was laying in that hole of water. Till he sunk away and never did show up again while the cattle were there. They had an old ravens. They're like a crow, only bigger. Squawk a little more than a crow does. They were always flying around making a racket. And magpies, there's quite a few magpies around. They had a guy, kind of an old guy, heavy-built old fella. Old John, I think his name was. About all he done while I was there was haul cottonseed hulls. They'd ship them in down there to that town, and he'd haul them out to the headquarters mostly, I guess. Once in a while he'd take some to a line camp where there was a house decent enough to hold them, protect them. But they'd feed them in the winter time. They're just the hulls, quite a lot of cotton sticking to them. I don't know how great they were for feed, but that's what they were getting in to feed in the winter time. That's about all he done was haul them. About one trip a day, I think, is all he could make. And I was there a couple of weeks and drinking that alkali water and eating beef, beans, and biscuits. And I got a hell of a cramping in my stomach and got sick. Didn't feel like going one day, so they told me we were at headquarters. So they told me just to stay in that day. And I was in the old bunkhouse laying there. And his wife came to the door around noon and wanted to know if I'd like to have some egg toast. Boy, I thought maybe that sounded pretty good, so she said, well, come out to the chuck house out there by the barn. She'd go out there and fix it for me. So I went out there and she made it just like you got at home, boy. It sure tasted good. Egg in the milk and toast. Boy, really good. Come to find out, she was a Kansas girl going to school at K-State. And pretty nice kind of a gal. I thought she was real good when she cooked that egg toast for me. Yeah, it's kind of hard to talk to the boss or get a chance to. I finally got a chance to talk to him one day and ask him what he planned on me doing when winter set in. We got done with that job. He said, well, he didn't really know. And he